Hello, my friends. I'm so excited for today's guest. I feel like I literally say that about every single guest, but today we have a very special guest because we have a client of mine who, again, has so graciously allowed her story to be shared with my community in hopes of letting you know that you are not alone on this journey and that you're not alone. So let me introduce my incredible client, Maria. Welcome, Maria. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Great. So why don't we just dive in? I like to start with my client interviews just by asking a little bit about who you are, and from your words, share with the community your kind of journey to pregnancy or approaching the whole fertility space before you met me, and what did that look like? What did you struggle with and what did you deal with?
Gotcha. So I am a doctor of physical therapy. That's what I do for my profession and for my career, but I think I really identify myself within that realm because I like to live by example. And so pretty much everything I do just goes with the notion of just trying to be the best version of myself, and just keeping myself very healthy. So during my career process, I've evolutionized, I would say, into the women's health or pelvic floor realm. And it kind of was by accident. I never really foresaw myself going into that area. It was offered in PT school to take some credits and some lessons. And honestly, I feel like I was just intimidated by it all. And so I kind of stuck with like sports orthopedics, and that's kind of just who I was. Just, I don't really think I'm super athletic, but I like to just go to the gym and just pretend I'm like an athlete. And I work with athletes, and that was just kind of my thing. And just getting more and more curious the further I got into my career, and almost for a little bit of a selfish reason. I wanted to learn more about the woman's body and about pregnancy and how the body changes, and how can I learn about that but assist with that. I think more so for myself, just being a woman and in the phase of my relationship, we were about to get engaged in a few months. We were talking about it, so I knew soon after that we wanted to try to get pregnant. So I took a course on pelvic rehab, and I fell in love with the entire concept of it. I feel like it was just an elaboration of what I was already doing, but just very specific, and in a more intimate, private area. So I just dug myself further and further into women's health in that whole area. And then I soon realized, this is almost about a year ago, exactly. I wanted to come off birth control, and I was on birth control for pretty much consistently, I think for like 8 to 9 years, maybe close to 10, somewhere in there. I took like a few hiatuses, but it wasn't longer than like maybe a few months. And so learning more about like the woman's body and just what birth control does. And then also thinking, where am I fertility wise? I know it takes a few months to get stabilized. And if we're about to get engaged, I know we want to have a wedding and soon after soon have kids. And I just want to have more knowledge of my body and how it goes through its cycle naturally. And so as I was coming off birth control, I actually accidentally got pregnant. Oops.
Mhm.
But that was a very interesting time because I'm trying to essentially learn how my body like goes through its natural thing, which brought me to several podcasts to learn about the natural fertility awareness method. I was trying to do that all myself. I got super overwhelmed, which probably also led to the accidental pregnancy because I just wasn't sure about things. And then now I'm pregnant, and I wanted to learn about how to just like nutrify myself being pregnant. And I had, my ups and downs in those first few weeks, just like feeling off and confused about a few things. And then we found out that I miscarried around like 7 weeks. And then soon after that, I was coming off of the miscarriage. Things were normalizing, but I could just sense that something was pretty wrong. I just wasn't feeling right. It was taking too long to normalize. I really didn't think my hormones would take that long. to kind of like balance themselves. So I knew I needed more testing. And because I was listening to all these podcasts at the time, like pre-pregnancy, during pregnancy, I actually forget what podcast I was listening to, but this is how I found Nora. And
Mm.
it was just a really inspiring podcast that I was listening to. I think it was probably a month or a month and a half after the miscarriage. And I was, still a little unsure about how to track my cycle. And of course, I wasn't normalized then. So I couldn't really do it on my own. And I've heard a few podcasts with like a few coaches, fertility coaches, but I think at that point when I heard this podcast with Nora, I was like, this is it. Like just right here, right in front of me. This is her information. I loved what I was listening. Let me just jump on a call with her. And then I did. And then now I'm working with Nora, and there's so much that we've been through together so far. And I think it really has helped me also just personally really identify who I want to be like as a clinician, as a future business owner, and just like the continuous certifications that I want to get for myself. So it's been a really incredible journey. And that's kind of how my story started and where it's at right now.
Amazing. Thank you, Maria. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for the kind words. I get so full from hearing feedback from my clients, and how it's impacted your life and improved your life. And it's so interesting to hear also how this bleeds into so many different areas of people's lives. Like, it's funny also, I find I attract a lot of, I'm working with an osteopath. I had a medical physician as a client in the past. I now have like pelvic physiotherapist. So I find it's, I believe so much, well, not so much, but life is really all about energy, and we are magnets,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the law of attraction. We're always attracting people into our lives that are going to teach us to grow, evolve, and learn, whether it's the annoying boyfriend who cheated on you and did mean things to you, or whether it's your best girlfriend who, gives you so much love and support, or a coach, whatever it might be. We really are always, I think, presented with the people in the divine timing, in the right place and time to help us evolve and grow to the next person, or to evolve just into the more whole person that we are meant to be. So I really appreciate that. And I really feel it goes both ways. It's reciprocated, because I always learn so much from my clients. My clients, along with yourself, and we're going to get into it shortly, always present me with these new cases that are like, okay, now, like, I'm always this little FBI investigator. Like, every individual
Mm-hmm.
is so unique and different. And I always have to think, okay, whether or not two clients have the same gut health issue, they're both handled in such a different way. So thank you, Maria, for allowing me to coach you and guide you through this process. It's been a pleasure for me as well. So that being said, just to clarify, so I guess we are recording this at the end of December 2022. Marie and I started working together in the summer of this year, so June 2022. But Maria, you had mentioned your miscarriage, and that happening and getting off birth control. That was the beginning of 2022. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? That was like January, December into January.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Um, so I guess to start off was to start off with, so why did you decide to invest in a one-on-one coaching program like this, um,
Mm-hmm.
outside of maybe just going to your conventional medical doctor to figure out how to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what was going on in your body? Because I there's a couple things that we're going to dive into about what you were dealing with your health, but maybe you can share
Mm-hmm.
that now with certain things that you
Mm-hmm.
were dealing with to figure out, well, how do I know who to work with?
Absolutely. And that's a really great question because being in the medical community and working with many different types of practitioners and clinicians, um, I do have my own opinion of who I feel that is the best person to go to for certain things, and how I kind of figured that out myself was, I'm very open. So I'm talking to my GYN. I'm letting her know, the things that I'm dealing with. And it more or less kind of gets like brushed off a little bit. Like, okay, well, that's normal. Like you just had a miscarriage. Things just have to settle down. And there is truth to that 100%, but the miscarriage happened in April and now fast forward into June. And
Mhm.
I just feel like, I had my progesterone measured and things were coming down. I had my other levels checked and I was coming down. And I tend to have is I think it's like a worst trait about me is that I tend to do compare myself to certain things around me.
Mhm.
So I know, of course, with social media, it's so easy just to kind of get a certain image stuck in your head. And I know that there was an influencer that I do follow. She had a recent miscarriage, I think like a month before mine. And it just seemed that like she kind of bounced back somewhat normal. And so that was kind of getting in my head. And then it led me to listening to certain other podcasts. I want to find the podcast that I found you on because it's like coming back to me. Because there was an individual who had a miscarriage and she was suffering from like insomnia and she could not sleep and she was using essential oils to help her sleep. And this had me kind of thinking, okay, if I'm going to be brushed off by my medical provider that I trust that followed me throughout this pregnancy, they're saying that I'm fine, but I'm hearing other stories that other people are feeling that they're not fine. I'm resonating with that. So then who do I go to? I've already went to
Mhm.
you. What else is out there? And so I have also come to realize that, within this medical hub, medical providers are trained to practice medicine and they hear your symptoms, but oftentimes it's more of here is a medication to help your symptoms. They just don't have the time and the resources in their training to actually hear more because it's really pushed to have high volume. And when you have high volume, you really can't give all of yourself to multiple versions of people you're trying to help. It's just, I mean, some people are probably better at it than others, and I just know that it's very taxing. It's very difficult to do that. Um, so I understand those limitations there. And I have heard, these women struggling with side effects of miscarriage, speaking to other practitioners or um, individuals that run their own business. And, they can take clients on more slowly and they can invest more time with their clients and hearing all these success stories. I knew that I eventually wanted to invest in a coach. And I just didn't think that I was nervous. I didn't think it was the right time for it just because I'm in the middle of planning a wedding. And I think just mulling over that for a few weeks and just things not getting better, I really value investing in my health because I only have one body, I only have one self. And I just, wasn't feeling mentally and physically all linked. And I wasn't going to get that support from, my writers. So that's what kind of led me to um, find a person that could dedicate the time and resources to me. And I made the right decision. So very
Mm.
happy for that.
Nice. You said that so beautifully, and I think coming from the medical, because maybe also from the profession that you're in as well. I loved the way that you put the conventional system is just not set up and built to give you the time and attention that you need, the way other practitioners do. And that's so true. And it's not a knock on doctors and, that doctors are bad or they don't know what they're doing, because that's not the case. Everybody, I think, has a place and a space for their role. But again, I think we're so blessed and lucky to be living in such a time where we can be so connected with all our technology, and we have so much holistic alternative practitioners that are out there that are more mainstream, more in the forefront. And really, it's about for each individual navigating the system in a way to really find the best team that is going to support you,
Mm-hmm.
because every single person, I call it the fertility committee, every single person um, has a place in your life as a certain provider or practitioner to help you optimize health, get pregnant, whatever health condition anybody is dealing with. So um,
Mm-hmm.
with that said, let's dive into, because I'm thinking about when we first met and what we were first talking about. I'm even thinking about back to our discovery call back in June.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking about the kind of goals when we came into, okay, Maria's getting started. I'm doing her intake. We're going to start her cycle charting. But so much has shifted and changed and morphed in our time because one, we kind of peel this layer, this onion layer off one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we discover something and then we're like, oop, we need to pivot. And then we kind of pivot and do something. We peel another onion layer off. Oop, then we need to pivot. So do you want to?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to kind of throw it over to you, and maybe you can share what that kind of trajectory or that timeline looked like from when we got
Mm-hmm.
on the discovery call to starting cycle charting, but then we kind of paused on the cycle charting because there were other
Yeah.
issues that we had to deal with. So just to
Mm-hmm.
share, like, you know, you kind of don't know what you don't know until you start getting into the weeds of it. So
Mm-hmm.
I think you're a
Mm-hmm.
perfect example to kind of
Yeah,
showcase what that would look like.
absolutely. Um, so like the immediate goal when we first met was to learn how to track my cycle. Because I was just starting to kind of normalize again from the
Mhm.
miscarriage. And I was trying to kind of recall back to the few things that I was focusing on in that January, February time before I got pregnant in March.
Mhm.
And I felt that it was very overwhelming. And so I'm like, I need help. And also because those first few weeks of pregnancy, I noticed that I was dealing with a little bit of a gut issue. I was chronically bloated and I looked like I was 3 months pregnant. And I think that I was like 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. I'm like, it's just not, it's not right. It just didn't feel right.
Mm.
And I'm like, I mean, I've never been pregnant before, but I just, I don't know. There's just like some sort of odd feeling. Um, and I was struggling. I was struggling to find the right foods to eat so I could feel a little bit more normal. I was trying to get different books, how do you optimize, your health while pregnant, the calories, like what do you eat in your first trimester? Is it true? Do you, eat more? You eat the same? What do you do? And so I felt lost with that. And so I think my main goal was just to understand how to cycle chart, understand, the cervical mucus, understand all of those details, how to do it. And then prepare my body more to optimize fertility, check in on my partner as well, kind of see where he stands. So we're just in the know and in the clear. And then, eventually just kind of learn a little bit more of what do you do when you are pregnant? Like you kind of take, I think, the same principles more or less, and, change it, of course, to what you need to. But ultimately, that was essentially the goal, of what I wanted to learn. And so as we were starting the process, I think like the first month or month and a half was really dedicated to cycle charting. And I think I was getting the hang of it. I was getting the hang of my body. Um, and then I think it wasn't until like later July, I noticed that like my bloating that I was having was really bad, and it didn't matter what part of my cycle I was in. It was just chronic bloat. Um, and I was starting to get a lot of facial acne, hormonal acne all around my chin. Um, and I know when you're approaching your luteal phase, that could be, or when you're in your luteal phase approaching it, that could happen. But it was just very abnormal for me. And so then in our calls together, we would check in. We were planning to check in on my hormone levels, which I think is just the standard anyways. So I was just
Mhm.
very excited to kind of see like where my hormones were at. When we finally got my results, everything was pretty much stabilized. I think like the two things that we were focusing on was replenishing my vitamin D and my B12 or my B vitamins, which I think naturally are kind of low, especially someone coming off birth control. So it wasn't like
Exactly.
super, like abnormal. Like, okay. And then I think we decided to, we had some other little supplements to kind of help, I think, calm down like my adrenal glands, like any stress that I was having. Um, and I think it wasn't until like a month later, there wasn't much improvement. So then
Mhm.
we decided to do like a vitamin C flush, because that's when
Mhm.
I was also sharing that I was having consistent bowel movements. The bloating obviously hinted something was going on. So we did the vitamin C flush, and after that, still felt the same.
Mm-hmm.
So then we put our thinking caps on again, and that essentially led to a elimination diet first. I started to feel a little bit better. And just being a little FBI agent myself, I started doing research online, which is essentially why I have Nora, so I don't have to do that, but I couldn't help myself.
No, but everybody does. Everybody,
Yeah.
nobody can help themselves. And I do encourage that. I mean, I encourage all my clients to, I'll give you resources and books and read this
Hmm.
article. And it's so important. It's so important.
Hmm. Absolutely. And, I think that just made me a little bit more knowledgeable of like potentially of what was going on.
Hmm.
Um, and I found these supplements that, because I think we actually like loosely threw out candida overgrowth at that point. And that's
Yes.
why we decided to do the elimination diet. And so I
Yes.
started to do my own research on candida. And in the interim, I was getting a test, a blood kit, blood test kit to test my blood to see, what was going on, if I had candida overgrowth, and it was also a food sensitivity as well. So I was very excited to see that. I put myself on some supplement that, is pretty much like a probiotic. Um, and once we found out the results, I was positive for candida. And we found out all of my most of food sensitivities, the 88 foods they were testing. Then I went on a candida protocol, and have been on that now for about, I think, like 6 weeks, like 5.5 to 6 weeks. And I have been seeing much of a difference. I ended up losing, I mean, it's not about weight, but I could just tell how different my body's changed. It's gone back to where I was before all this chaotic stuff happened. So it was like a 10-pound difference. And most of it, which is just so crazy. And I actually have a good friend of mine, a colleague, that's kind of going through the same thing as me. And she's doing her own holistic pathway as well. Um, Her goal was more so just like gut health. And so, a lot of the weight that I was struggling with was just all like inflammatory. It was just burnt
Inflammation.
fat.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
It
And I think
it's
that
so
like it,
crazy, so crazy to realize that. You don't realize that we hold so much stress in our body, and it can manifest
mhm.
just like this excess puffiness.
Yes. Yes. And even before this happened to me personally, although I'm a physiotherapist, I really do love everything nutrition. I started out my studies as a nutrition major. So, I always essentially tie things back to nutrition and what is your foundation. And like my mom struggles with gut issues. And even to all my patients, I'm not certified in anything yet. So I just kind of say this as like, hey, this is a fun fact. Go check it out. But a lot of things that you could be dealing with, chronic physical pain, can be
Hmm.
tied into what's going on with your body. And I was beginning to feel that. I think right around the time that we decided that we needed to test for candida, because I was getting a lot of muscle tension. My muscles were freaking out. I was feeling chronic tightness, chronic pain, and my joints were hurting. And I have an old knee injury. And whenever I have more stress or more inflammation in my body, it starts to act up. And so it was just a stressful time. So I'm like, okay, probably stress. But somewhere deep down, I knew it wasn't just stress. There was something else going on to manifest these symptoms. And so, like, that was, it was difficult to deal with personally, but that's what I just find so intriguing about health, and why I really advocate to invest your time, invest yourself working with someone who will also invest in you too. Because, even though it's not the traditional process of, hey, this is my insurance, I pay X amount a month, I want to use the providers that covered in my insurance. Yes, you're going to get care. Yes, you probably will get decent care, but the care just looks a little bit different. It's like
Hmm.
crossing all of your T's and I's kind of superficially. Go through the Eastern medicine route. They have your back that way. But then, you have things outside of the box that need a little bit more of a microscope to look into. And you have to make that investment in order, I think, sometimes to be the best version of yourself. And it's
Hmm.
just, it's frustrating to work in model in healthcare right now that is like more of that Eastern side. And eventually I want to kind of create my own way where I blend things, Eastern and Western kind of style of medicine and rehab and whatever. Um, But, it's just magical to me that, my symptoms were ultimately fixed with just a different perspective, a different approach. And it's knowing what's good for me personally and individually for now in order to get myself rebalanced. Um, and it's taken months. We started in June and it's now December.
Mm,
And
it
what
takes
provider can
time.
really do that? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly. It takes time, and that's something try and stress a lot. I think a lot of people coming on discovery calls or thinking about their trajectory on, their knowing that they need to change health in order to successfully get pregnant or heal their bodies. Most of the time, people find me after they've tried have miscarriages. I would say 98% of my clients have already either been pregnant, had a miscarriage, been on the journey for many, many years. There's probably 2% that come to me proactive, proactive, proactive. Like that's where I want to get people. But the reality of the situation is it doesn't happen that way. But that being
Mm-hmm.
said, when people come into this, when you start to look into more alternative solutions outside of just the medical model, you've already now clocked whether it's 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years trying, and so you feel really impatient, ready to go, like I don't have much time left, come on, like I want to get this solved and be pregnant in 3 months from now. But it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a little bit of a process to really explain that this is really all a process and it takes time. It really does take time. But if you have, if you have the right steps in place, then sometimes it takes a little, we've, like we said, we got to go through a bunch of pivoting before we find
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the right protocol. And we're on the right protocol now. I mean, you're 6 weeks into phase one of the
Mm-hmm.
anti-candida protocol, and we have phase two, and then there's a phase three. So you
Mm-hmm.
are a trooper, Maria. You're doing great. You're so dedicated. I have to commend you for that. But we always have to remember that this is not something that is forever. When you do have more of a restricted diet, or when you are um, when you might be like, you can't have alcohol, you really have to cut back on your sugar, or you have to go gluten free, or whatever the restrictions may be. It is not forever, but it will make such a big bang for your buck when you actually follow through with it for the period of time that we've allotted. And I think you're a perfect example and a perfect case to kind of showcase all of that. So has it been like, has it been really hard and challenging? I'd love to for you to share your
Mm-hmm.
your personal your personal
Yeah.
thoughts on that.
Um, so in the past, well, essentially what kind of like brought me into nutrition and I think like a health space, was my own personal struggles of, like my relationship, like with food. I love to eat. I grew up with a mom who could cook amazing. My grandmother, the same. I'm Italian. There's food everywhere all of the time. And I also just have a really big sweet tooth. So, as a young kid, you can kind of get whatever you want. And so I essentially struggled with that, struggled with weight. And then, eventually I kind of found my own way. And so sometimes if I find myself in more of like a restrictive sense, it can maybe bring back some, older triggers and, just that, I guess, harder relationship with food at times, like, don't eat this or whatnot, or go through like binge moments. But I think because before we even figured all this out, I began to really realize, what my body kind of needs, like how much protein, how much fat, how to do things in a more timely manner. I've dealt with intermittent fasting in the past, and I think that led more to binge eating. So I know always to try to have breakfast. And I think that my body's kind of just normalized where I don't really have such strong cravings anymore for sugar, which is very helpful during this protocol because I
Oh,
can't have that right now. So,
yeah.
that's helpful. So I think eliminating the things was harder, of course, in the beginning, but I was already a little bit at a time doing it. So I think I've just
Yes.
kind of built in this tolerance and a little bit more discipline. And I've always tried to dabble with, supplements for like rice, the cauliflower rice. So I'm very already knowledgeable of how to try to get creative, how to think outside the box, how to get, my energy from my vegetables and what type of sugars can I have from the fruits, and just try to keep, everything like balance as much as I can. So, at times, especially the holidays, it can be very difficult when you're trying to meet up with friends and, especially trying to explain like what you're going through. Because a lot of people will just superficially think, oh, well, you're going to be a bride in X amount of time. So you're just on this diet. You just can't have sugar. It's fine. You're not going to gain weight. And it's like, I hear you. Thank you. I respect that. But I don't really like sometimes it's just uncomfortable to have to explain myself. Like, I can't drink right now, but we're out at a bar celebrating a friend's birthday or whatever the case is. And I try to just keep it very general and not go into it. Because, I just don't, it's a long thing sometimes to explain. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that has probably been like the most difficult thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think like the planning for the food is not always the easiest, but I think I'm doing pretty well with that, keeping track of my supplements and making sure I'm having them. I'm good with two. Um, it's just the social aspect is a little difficult and trying to explain my situation, or if I'm traveling home, I have to have a separate dinner made. My fiance and I have
Yeah.
to make separate foods, ordering out and like that becomes tricky. But
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes I feel like I'm not 100% satiated, and who knows, maybe that's just because I'm just missing a little bit of the other stuff. But I try to, you know, supplement like that fix or that urge. Or sometimes, like I was just saying before the podcast, I found these cookies I haven't had in 4 years and I loved them so much. And I'm like, you know what? Just one cookie I think is okay. And so I had the
Yes.
cookie.
I stress that a lot. Like, don't, it's not about being 100% fully perfect all the time because that's not going to happen. So when you said that, I was like, yes, Maria, you have the cookie.
It's so funny. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think and I've been trying to do this myself. I'll encourage patients too. I think it really comes down to like a perspective.
Yes.
Like you kind of see like the light at the end of the tunnel, this is better for yourself, and along the way like you're going to feel, happier, lighter, like less stressed and whatnot.
Mm.
Giving up coffee, that was hard, but matchas are my thing, so I'm doing that. You just try
We
to
find
make
ways to
best of
make it
it.
work. Yes, yes, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. So where we are now, so Maria is still on the journey of getting pregnant again. She's got a big
Mm-hmm.
milestone coming up in the next 3 weeks, but I think by the time this podcast comes out, the milestone will have already been passed. But
Yeah.
you are getting married in 3 weeks at the beginning of January, so I'm so excited for you. And I know as you were kind of mentioning and alluding to, talking about even the challenges of just there have been a lot, the challenges have been with more socially with figuring out how to explain all this, but also while you have been doing or optimizing your health, your gut health, which eventually will not eventually, which at the same time or consequently optimizes your fertility, because I always say your healthiest self is your most fertile self, right? So for
Mm-hmm.
Maria, it was really about focusing on her gut and working on her candida overgrowth, because your numbers were quite high and your food sensitivity numbers were quite high. And so just by focusing on a protocol that was more targeted and strategically built for you and your body, the natural benefits that you reap from it are just feeling lighter, feeling better, losing some extra weight that you felt was just kind of you were holding on to because of inflammation, which ultimately now is going to make you feel better. And I know you've even shared this about, you're just feeling better in your body, and
Mm-hmm.
feeling really good and confident in your wedding dress. So there's so much of a give and take with all of this. And so
Mm-hmm.
Maria is getting married in early January, and then after that we are going to, I think, again, we're going to have to pivot and see as we go, but as we move through the candida protocol, jump back onto the cycle charting to then get you back on the
Mm-hmm.
bandwagon for when it's time to start trying again. So
Mm-hmm.
so what would you say, Maria, was your biggest takeaway during our time together for everyone listening? Just one or two of your biggest takeaways. It doesn't have to be super
Mm-hmm.
profound, but whatever you think is most relevant to share?
Um, I think number one is, like invest in yourself because you're worth it. Um, I think that there's a way to make it work. Um, and it's so true. The best version of yourself is the healthiest version, and it's much more, not to make it more complicated sounding, but it is much more complicated than like, hey, I'm just going to eat more healthy. I'm going to have this apple and I'm
Mhm.
great. I'm going to go walk outside and I'm good. Yes, you start somewhere. It is more complicated than that. And, you can search all you want. You can go on different, apps or pay for an app or go on Instagram. Sure, there's so much accessible stuff, but giving yourself the time and the space to really just dive into maybe what you need, especially if you're feeling lost or struggling, it's worth the investment. And don't be afraid to take that leap. Do your research, make sure you're comfortable with it, but for sure invest in your health. Um, and just the power of the mind and the power of food. They're kind of different things, but I think ultimately the same concept is just like, don't overlook the easiest things out there, because once you just start making, more conscientious decisions, a little bit can go a long way.
Mhm.
And it's just something that really amazes me, and I'm just truly passionate about it because I'm fortunate I can be a part of it myself and then teach it to others, and it's just a wonderful journey.
Mhm. You have such a great outlook, and I love the way you kind of frame everything with your mindset, and I think that really makes or breaks the entire experience. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and share your journey. And before we go, I always ask, always ask my clients, what one recommendation, I mean, you already gave a couple great ones, but if there's another one, and that one recommendation that you would give others on the trying to conceive journey who are currently trying, and maybe struggling, what would you say to them? If somebody could say
Mm-hmm.
something to you before you met me, what would it be?
uh I think, like, I don't want to say like do your research, but like more so like there's hope out there. I think that's more appropriate to say, because like there are communities out there that are going to help you through this. Because it is very frustrating. You can get very lost in your own world with things, and you're looking for answers, and sometimes you may not find them right away. So like there's definitely hope out there, and dive yourself into the communities that are directly involving themselves within fertility or within health, because your answer is in there somewhere. There's so many resources to learn about it. Podcasts, you can download iTunes or Spotify, and learn so much more within podcasts themselves, and everyone is findable these days. So um keep your head up. It's gonna get resolved somehow.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.